It's Roz, and I've been getting behind with those tags again. It's a worry, isn't it? No, not really. They're fun. I've realised why tags are one of the reasons why they're such fun to record. It's because you don't have to plan the structure at all. You haven't down to think, oh, what am I going to talk about? Because you've got questions to follow. Yeah, so it's a nice change. Now, this one I was tagged by Steve, lovely, wonderful, adorable Steve Donoghue, and the original tag was by someone called John Written in Blood, who I know nothing of, and I think it's not a new tag. And Steve has added a whole load of extra questions because it's the Nosy Booktuber tag, now with extra nosiness. Now, look, Steve, I know you are extra nosy, and oh, it's making me touch my nose talking about nosiness, isn't it? But how many prompts have we got here? 16 prompts? Oh, goodness me, give us a break. I shall try and do this swiftly, otherwise we'll be here all day. So, how many books have you read this year is the first prompt. And thank heaven for Goodreads, because it means I don't have to count them. And 66, which is a fraction of what one would read if one's Steve, but it's a fair number for me. In your average year, I probably read somewhere between 80 and 100 books. But this year I've read quite a lot of plays, 10 in fact, I think, so far this year, and more poetry than usual as well. And of course, both of those tend to be shorter, not necessarily, but usually. So that's bumped up the total so far. But I doubt whether it'll be 132 at the end of the year. I'm hoping to read a few kind of longer books as the year goes on. Question number 2. And these are the sort of normal kind of questions before we get on to the strange Steve ones. Of the books you've read, which is your favourite? Now, this is just an impossible question, isn't it? And also a slightly stupid question. But I will give it a go again. And this is not going to be the same answers as I gave in the mid-year freak out book tag, because every morning I wake up I've probably got a different favourite in my mind. But what I did was I've picked a favourite from January, which was The Radiance of the King by Camara, Laye, which was just a wonderful, different book. I did do a Scally Dandle video about it, so I won't talk about it, but I would strongly recommend it as the kind of antidote to the European authors' books about Darkest Africa. This is like the antidote book, and so great favourite. And a favourite from the end of the year, no, well, it's not the end, the middle now, favourite from June, is a book of poetry, because I've read a lot of poetry this year, and that's Portable Paradise by Roger Robinson, which I think is a very fine book of poetry. I have a feeling it's one of those ones that's going to stick with me and grow, so although I only read it about a week ago, yeah, I'm going to pick that. Also asked for your least favourite book of the year, which is a bit I mean, I've definitely got a least favourite, which was Rubbernecker by Belinda Bauer, and I read it because it was for my book group. It was a thriller, and it just didn't really work for me on almost any level. But it's not interesting to talk for ages about, dull books, so I won't. Question number 3 is, do you have a favourite time and place that you like to read? Well, I think I've said before that I like to read anywhere and everywhere, and it's the reading I like rather than the time or the place, I guess. But if push comes to shove and I have to choose, I'd say my favourite time and place would be a balmy summer afternoon, and the place would probably be my back garden. And I would be lying with my head in the shade, but perhaps the rest of me in gentle sunshine and with a cup of tea by my side. That would be my favourite. Question 4. How many hours per day do you have the opportunity to read? Well, it depends whether it's a work day or a not work day. If it's a work day, then I'm squeezing reading into odd little corners. So I get about half an hour to read as I walk to work, and maybe the same again going home if I am walking home. half an hour at night, before I go to sleep. Maybe some other odd bits in the day if I'm lucky, but really, I work relatively long hours normally, so that's about it. Hour a day maximum probably in the week. At the weekends, got more freedom, more leeway, and reading is one of my great pleasures, so I'll read more at the weekend. I would love to have more time to read, and I could make more time maybe if I cut some other things out of my life, but what I can't cut out is work, so there we go. Also, and I've got to be honest here, like reading is a bit of a selfish pleasure. Like when I'm reading, I'm just totally buried in it, and for other people in my household, that might mean that I'm kind of keeping them at a distance because I'm reading, and so I can't do that all the time, can I? Interesting. Question number 5. Do you read only physical books, ebooks, or audiobooks, or a combination of the three? Okay, now I'd say probably these days I read around 50-50 or 60-40 ebook, paperbook, because I normally get books from the library and secondhand bookshops, and people give me books as presents, and I'll occasionally buy an actual new paperbook. This year it's very different. I would guess that about 90% of my reading has been ebooks, because that's what I can get a hold of during coronavirus lockdown. Almost no audiobooks. Audiobooks just don't seem to do it for me. I try at intervals. It's like me in graphic novels. Every now and then I try a graphic novel, and every now and then I try an audiobook. Unless it's a reread of something I know and love, it always doesn't quite give me the whole experience, I suppose. If I became visually impaired or in some other way wasn't able to read the words, then I'd be very grateful for audiobooks to fill in the gap. But as long as I can read things for myself, I'd probably rather do that. Question number 6. What is your main pet peeve when trying to read? Okay, 2 ways of interpreting this, I think. Your pet peeve external to the book. I'm going to pick on my poor cat and say that my pet peeve is when she sees that I'm reading in bed and comes and places herself between the Kindle or the book and my face. Yeah, she'll get in here in the gap and stop me reading. Don't really mind though. She's sweet and elderly and adorable. So my in-book pet peeve is when I'm quite enjoying a book and the author's kind of telling me things in a subtle way, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I see where you're going, that's interesting, and then they decide, oh, I better really spell it out in black and white in case my readers are too dense to get what I'm talking about. Oh, that's so irritating. It's like, oh, please trust your readers. It's almost enough to make me want to put a book down, but I try not to because I'm not a great bailer. Question number 7. What is the strangest place you found yourself reading? Well, I will read anywhere, as I've said. Strangest, I suppose, I used to... I really love going on long walks, including that kind of long distance walks, multi-day walks. And I used to sometimes do that by myself. Now I generally go either with Tilly of Tilly's Shelf, my daughter, or with Steve, my husband. I've kind of converted him to the long walk idea and the multi-day walk idea. But when I used to go by myself, I would take a book with me, and I would stop now and then on the walk and just sit and read for a bit to rest my legs and to kind of compensate for having no one to talk to. It's nice being solitary, but it's also nice to have someone else's voice in your head sometimes, and a book would fill that purpose. So I've read on top of hills and in woods and on the banks of the Thames, walking bits of the Thames path. Maybe the strangest was walking part of the South Downs Way, and on the top of the downs you sometimes get like kind of gorse thickets that have like little nooks in them that you can go and lurk in, and I was lurking in one of those gorse thickets in a little little grassy glade, sheltering from the wind and enjoying kind of spring sunshine. And some poor walker came in there, I think, to have a pee, and was very taken aback to find me sitting there reading my book. Prompt number 8. Are you a critical reader or do you read just for enjoyment? Well, what a very, very, very stupid question that is. A real false dichotomy, isn't it? Critical enjoyment, they go together, don't they? Yeah, I think I read critically to increase my enjoyment of many books. Yeah, I mean, having said that, I can enjoy a book that doesn't have great depths. It's not like everything I read has to be, lend itself to like dense criticism. But I like a book to stand up for what it's trying to do. So I want a thriller to be a good thriller, and I want a murder to be a satisfying murder. So to enjoy it, yeah. So I never completely turn off the critical, I suppose. Interesting. Now we're on to Steve's extra nosy prompts. So number 9, is there one specific thing that will immediately prompt you to stop reading a book? Well, not as a rule. If I've decided to read it, I usually keep going to the end. I mean, not literally cover to cover all in one go, but I tend to try and pick books well and not give up on them. And sometimes it's halfway through a book that you really kind of warm to it in a way. Yeah, I think I'm going to blame my poor elderly cat again and say one thing that will stop me from reading a book is she's I'd say her digestion is not as healthy as it was. She is 20 years old, okay? And every now and then she'll suddenly, all cats vomit from time to time, it's hairballs, but she'll suddenly have a burst of diarrhoea. So if I hear that happening, that will make me stop to go and sort it out as swiftly as possible. There you go. The other reason I might stop is if some very, very kind person has cooked me a lovely meal and is summoning me to come and eat it. And that's usually Steve, my dear husband. Have you ever actually fallen asleep while reading? Oh, yes, all the time. Most evenings, actually, because I'm always trying to squeeze in my half an hour's read or so at night. And sometimes I'm dropping off and then I wake up and think, oh, no, I'll just try and get to the end of the chapter. There, gone again. Yeah. So, yes. Have you ever stolen a book, you naughty thing? I have. And I think it is sufficiently long since this happened that I can safely tell this story. Okay, so back in the autumn of 1981, I'd done my A-levels. I'd spent the summer interrailing around Europe, taking trains and camping in and going to visit museums and Greek islands and came back to England and thought I need to earn some money in my gap year so I could do some more travelling and have some different experiences. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to work in a bookshop? Because I love books. And I got a job in Foyles. Foyles, a very famous bookshop in central London. And Foyles always took on a lot of young staff in the run-up to Christmas when I guess it was a busy time for them. So it was like a relatively easy place to get a book. And I thought, oh, that would be lovely, Foyles, what could be better? Oh, my goodness. It may have been 1981. In the rest of the world, inside Foyles bookshop, it was still 1881. Okay, how they didn't have cash tills, like things with buttons that you press, not even manual ones. What they had was like little wooden booths with a kind of a glass window at the front and a slot, and a kind of wooden counter with like holes in it for notes and money, and someone would the customer would find their book. I think they would take their book to a proper bookseller who would hold onto the book for them and write out a little chit of paper with how much the book was, and then they would bring that little chit of paper to the little wooden booth that I, the cashier was stuck in, and I would take their little sheet of paper and they would give me the money, and I would count it all out by hand and give them back their change and write on the little sheet of paper, and they would take the sheet of paper back to the proper bookseller's counter and get handed their book. Now, basically, you were trapped in this box if you were a cashier for like half a day at a time, till you got your little lunch break. So, and sometimes, you know, if you were in a boring, an unpopular section of you could sit there for like half an hour on end without a single person bringing a little sheet of paper and some cash to pay. No cards, no. I don't think they even took checks. Perhaps they did. I don't know. Anyway. So I used to borrow a book from the area in which I was sat. I'd like kind of snaffle one as I went into my little box in the morning and read it in between customers. Okay, and one of those books was this one, The History of Myddle by Richard Gough. And this book was such a delightful surprise and pleasure to me that I read it over a few days. And by the time I'd finished it, I realised that it was actually, I'd forgotten that I was meant to be reading it terribly carefully as a beautiful new book that I was going to put back on the shelf that someone might buy, and I'd broken the spine and battered it. So in the end, I just had to like slip it in my bag and take it home because I didn't dare admit that I'd ruined one of their books. I bet all the cashiers did that, or half of them, because yeah. If you're wondering what this book is, it is a version. Well, it's a kind of an edited version of the writings of someone called Richard Gough, who was like an ordinary chap, like a freeholder in the parish of Myddle in Shropshire, and he started writing it in around 1700, and he was writing about kind of the history of his parish and the people that lived there, and how he kind of organised it was by picking each pew in the church and writing about the family that owned that pew or sat in that pew, and the stories that he knew about them over the sort of previous sort of 100 years, and it is full of drunkenness, violence, thievery, murder, adultery, generally, you know, war, as well as details of kind of agricultural life. It was, the idea that England in the sort of end of the 16th, or end of the 17th century, around 17th, beginning of 18th century in England, the idea that it was like some sort of peaceful, green and pleasant land. Well, just read this book and you'll know otherwise. Whew. So, prompt number 12. What are your specific methods for dealing with book snobs? Well, I don't think book snobs bother me that much. This is a real Steve question, because I think he finds book snobs really irritating, because he's like one of the most well-read people there is, but he's not snobbish about books. He reads all sorts of genres and enjoys all sorts of things, so he gets a bit wound up by them. Whereas I'm not sure I do so much. I mean, it depends a bit on my mood and their age. If they're a kind of young, enthusiastic English literature student who's full of what they've just sort of discovered, I try not to be too mean, you know. Life's too short. I can go away and kind of like smugly smile to myself, you know. 13. Question 13. Look at your immediate surroundings and answer, are you in control of your books, or are your books in control of you? Okay, well, if I look around in this room, I'll think that I'm in control of my books, because this has like, it's got some poetry, it's got sagas and epics. It's also got a chunk of my alphabetical collection of fiction. If, on the other hand, you were in my bedroom and you saw the stacks of books on the shelf next to my bed, you would think that the books were in control of me. So it depends where you are. Question 14. Have you ever watched a movie or a TV show and wished it were a book? No, I haven't. I have often found myself wishing that I was reading a book and not watching TV. And then you think, oh, well, why don't you then? And it's that thing I was saying earlier about, reading is a bit selfish in closing yourself down into yourself. And sometimes I'll sit and watch television to be with other members of my family, even though that perhaps wouldn't be the thing that I would most want to do. We make compromises because we love the people around us. Sometimes they want to sit and read a book too, and that is lovely. Question 15. Have you ever written to an author? No, why would I? Perhaps people do. Like, they write their books and they send them out in the world, and then they become the property of us readers, and we can kind of just do what we like with them. Yeah. I mean, I'm quite interested sometimes in hearing authors speak about their books, but I'd never write one. And question 16, last one. What is your sorting ritual for new books? Did you go table to floor to shelf or more roundabout? Okay, paper books, they're going to go on a stack by my bed. As I said, that's the out of control bit. Then there's kind of a shelf in the landing where they might kind of move down to when they've been read, and they're waiting there to be sorted into the sort of sections and like alphabetical system, and sometimes they'll end up on top of a shelf because I haven't yet managed to reshuffle things enough to fit them in, but they're loosely, yeah, that's how I do it. On the other hand, my Kindle is a complete and utter chaos, and I think I actually probably need to find a system for organizing the books in there, because now I'm now getting like as many ebooks as I get paper books, or so I need a system for that. Maybe that's what Goodreads is meant to help with. I don't know. Well, that's enough questions. Goodness me, see, it's nearly 22 minutes already, and that's Steve's fault for adding all those extra questions. Let's tag a few people, and I'm going to tag Karen Evans, who's quite a new booktuber who's been commenting and I've been exchanging things with. I'm going to pick another Karen, which is Karen of Run Right Reads, because I discovered her through Caribaphon, and I would love to know more about her as a reader, so that'd be a nice one for her. Maybe 2's enough? Yeah, I'll stick with 2. But if anyone else fancies reading this, doing this, then feel free. Bye.